All right. We are live. Bauman Generation Gap Sports, episode number 22. And the hot topics tonight consist of Masters golf and a wrap up of the NCAA tournament. Let's just dig right in with the Masters and what took place there. That was a really fun tournament to watch. But it was really sort of a battle of attrition if you weren't Scotty Scheffler. Charlie, you're probably the resident golf enthusiast here. What do you see happen in that tournament, and were you pleased with the outcome?
Well, I think it was maybe one of the less interesting Masters actually, in that um, Scotty was the favorite, and although he is a incredibly likable guy, he doesn't bring a ton of excitement to the tournament, unfortunately. Um, I think the early in the final round, things were set up for an exciting finish with a lot of fireworks, and he kind of put the pedal to the metal a little bit. And at the same time, the other guys that were in contention all backed up with some untimely double bogeys. So it wasn't quite the nail biter that a lot of Masters have been in the past. Nor do we see the birdies and eagles on 13 and 15 from guys in second and third and fourth positions to make their charge. So um, it was a good tournament, but to me, it didn't quite live up to the standards of some of the Masters in the past.
No, you could argue certainly what John Rahm's victory last year was interesting until the point where Koepka could no longer stick with him. I think what might be kind of interesting, you look at golf right now. Certainly there's the LIV versus the PGA, but if Scotty Scheffler is really on a roll right now, is this something that's going to continue for years to come? And is there a Tiger-like intimidation factor when it comes to Scotty Scheffler right now? Because it seemed like everybody kind of crumbled around him. They all made mini runs, and then they fell apart.
Right. It's hard to see him ever being as intimidating as Tiger. He doesn't have that same persona. Um, However, I looked at the updated world golf rankings, and he's got a huge gap over second place right now. In fact, I think the gap he's got over second place is about the same size as the gap between second place and like 80th. So he's going to be number one for almost guaranteed for another couple of years, unless somebody does something crazy.
So what do you guys think? There were some big name LIV golfers in this tournament. They have a number of past majors winners. Seven, I believe, were at least seven. What past Masters winners from LIV Golf. Where are those guys going to be in the next couple of years? Are they getting enough good competition on the LIV tour? When they get into a term like Masters, they see a guy like Scotty Scheffler, are they going to wilt, or what's going to happen there?
Well, I'll be bold enough to jump in, knowing very little about them. The well, let me start by saying I think what's happened to a number of those guys is they become invisible. Nobody I can't engage in what's happening on the LIV tour. It just doesn't grab me at all. And so I'm just not paying attention to these guys unless they show up at like the Masters. So I'm not sure that what they're doing is good for their games. But again, that's a tough judge. One of the things I did enjoy at the Masters, I can't remember which day this was, but they had some of the old time greats tee off. So Jack Nicklaus and Gary Player and Tom Watson all stroke them from the tee. That was a real blast from the past. And of course, Tom Watson's a local Kansas City guy, so we all know him well around here. And in fact, once many years ago, like must have been about 35 years ago, my family, my kids, and I ended up sitting right by Tom Watson in an airplane. He was coming back from an event in New Jersey, I think. And I had no idea he was behind us. I was busy taking care of other things. But my daughter discovered him, and she was engaging him during the entire flight. And finally, I was wondering, who is this guy who's so patient and has got her so enthralled? And lo and behold, it's Tom Watson. I was flabbergasted. Really nice guy. He's got a great reputation around here. So we're always glad to see him do something, see him turn up.
Yeah, I always find it a little interesting when Tom Watson and Gary Player tee off together, because they had a bit of a standoff about 25 years ago in one of those Grand Slam events where, well, Watson suggested that Gary Player was, we'll say, taking advantage of the rules.
Ooh.
And Gary Player did not care for that. And for a couple of years, Gary Player would see many opportunities to just take shots at Watson. And of course, Watson, to your point, is really a wonderful guy, well liked, well respected. Maybe that's part of what golf needs today, is a couple of things like that to spice it up a little bit. But I think you need more of these LIV golfers to actually perform a little bit better or be bigger or closer in the hunt and during a key event to make that happen. So anyway, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Bobby, I know you're an avid golf fan. Were you watching this from afar, and do you have any impressions?
Yeah, I mean, I had it on one of my screens, so I was kind of aware of what was going on. I saw, Tiger birdie the first hole. I was like, all right, this is cool. This will be interesting. And he made the cut, so that was impressive. And then things kind of derailed from there, but at least he finished the tournament, so that's probably progress to a degree. I liked how my guy Ludwig Oberg performed. I was the only one daring enough to pick somebody interesting, and he finished second. So gave Scheffler a run for his money. But yeah, getting back to the LIV, I mean, it's basically non-existent as far as I can tell. I mean, if it's ever on TV, I'm not aware of it. So it's almost like it's just in some other world, like the European tour that gets no visibility, and those guys just randomly show up to majors. So
it's on the CW network.
Okay, that's why it's in.
But you can watch it. I believe that stands for what, Country Western. At least that's what it used to stand for. And you can watch it live. I've actually tuned in maybe 3 times, and I've maybe been able to handle it for 2 to 4 minutes because I don't find it very interesting at all. The way they do it, it's not for me. But I thought was particularly interesting is months back, the final round of the AT&T Classic Tournament was rained out. So I believe it was CBS decided to air the previous year's final round on tape. And at the same time, LIV had its final round of one of its tournaments. And the taped replay of the previous year's AT&T outdrew LIV Golf by either 11 or 13 to 1. So I don't think it's catching on with American TV viewers yet. You wonder how much real patience the Saudis are going to have with this, because man, that's just not much of a product. I realize they have unlimited amounts of money to throw at it, but at some point, you think they lose interest as well. Ben, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think the Saudi Arabia and all the sports events they're financing now, I'm not sure if that's doing much. I know that in the soccer world, it's not going very well. They still get very little attendance for their games in Saudi Arabia. And, if I don't know, I mean, from what I hear, I guess the viewership for LIV Golf is not very good. And I can't imagine many people in Saudi Arabia are watching it either. So you start to wonder, it just seems like random pet projects from, billionaire Saudis. And I guess until they get bored and they blow their money on something else. but it's hard to imagine that any of this is worth the investment so far. So
sure. All right, let's wrap up golf. Let's move on to the NCAA tournament. Benny, can you give us a rundown on what happened? And if you look at our predictions, and you look at your bracket challenge, how the results came out?
well, it's quite fascinating. Yeah, it appears that John won, which I think to everyone's shock, considering, when everyone hears about John, it just doesn't seem like he's going to win it. So, but he did win this year. It's the first time he's won the bracket challenge, with an impressive score that was not in like the top 3 of all time, but he won. And yeah, I mean, it just shows that, if you keep working, keep grinding, occasionally you're gonna get a win and a victory. And
Yeah.
and John's kind of like one of those. If you really look at the bracket challenge, like different franchises, he's not like the Yankees or anything like that. He's not gonna win a lot. You don't expect him to win, but he's one of those that will, like, maybe like the Royals, where every 30 years you win a bracket challenge, and everyone will be like, wow, this is a great year. And we'll wait a few more decades.
I do see a trend here now. I called the Super Bowl. Called that baby. I called the NCAA bracket challenge. I called the final 2 teams.
Yeah.
I called the Masters. Certainly that can't be random luck.
Well,
I think that what we've established here is that, hey, I've got an eye for talent. I've got an eye for competition, and beyond that, I'm very humble about it. So,
well, I'm glad you feel that way, John. I mean, it's good for your self-esteem. It's not necessarily grounded in reality, but that's okay. That's not your strong suit. So, I mean, if we look at the historical standings of our predictions, you're tied for 3rd. So, both your brothers are still doing better than you. You have 19 successful predictions, and they have, well, my dad has 25, and good old little Charlie has 21. So, John, what do you make of that? I mean, being the middle child, which is obviously always, in terms of being the middle brother, that's kind of a hard thing to be, a hard position, because you're not the youngest, you're not the oldest, and that kind of looks like, you're struggling. Maybe there's something that's carried on because of psychologically of being in that position that's sort of impacted your predictions going forward the rest of your life.
I think I was really trying to do all these years, and it's kind of like what your brother Bobby was doing. He's trying to go on a limb a little bit, just to try to spice things up a little bit and be different. But this year, I say, you know what, I'm just going to go out there. I'll win every one of these things, and it'll just prove, like, hey, if you want to know where things are going, you want to make a good pick, I'm the guy you talk to. And beyond that, I want to go back to being humble, because that's the kind of guy I am.
Okay, new year, new John. All right, very impressive. I will say one kind of interesting thing about this is that so we've done the bracket challenge, and kept track of it 6 years now, and 3 out of 6 years, one of us has won the bracket challenge. So my dad, Nick, and now John have won bracket challenge. So 50% of the time, a Bauman wins that bracket challenge, which has around 20 brackets at least every year. So
yeah, so it's very interesting. You pointed that out, but then there's 3 guys who have not been able to collect the payday. And what are the issues there? I mean, how can the guys who won? How can we help you other guys advance your games a little bit?
Well, that's for me, I'm more of a middle of the pack person when it comes to bracket challenge. I don't finish in last out of us 6. That would be Bobby, who's done that the last 2 years now. So you might want to ask him that question, since he's got, Bobby's got all these TVs and they don't seem to be helping him. He's watching every game all the time. He's got like 6 TVs right now set up in front of him. And I'm just trying to understand, where's the disconnect? What's happening here?
Yep, too distracted focusing on hockey right now. We got do or die for the Red Wings tonight to make the playoffs. So that's where my focus is.
Can you show us your setup for your 6 TVs? You put that on the screen for us?
I got 2 TVs and a couple tablets right now.
Okay. And is this kind of like your answer to gaming, is to kind of hang out there and watch all these games simultaneously?
Answer to gaming? What do you mean?
Yeah. Well, I like gamers, like to play a number of high participation games at night with other people across the country. All right,
like video.
That's their thing. That's what they do, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
It's kind of like, is this sort of your
you could
version
make
of that?
comparison. Yeah.
Bobby, are you betting?
No, that doesn't really interest me much. It's all for the love of the game, Charlie.
Huh. It's kind of weird.
Well, yeah, based on his bracket, probably a good idea. He's not betting, so.
But you could short your own bets.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of bets, not this is all to do with betting, but I thought it was pretty interesting that the women's final NCAA tournament had a huge draw on television and far outpaced the men's. Even though the women's was on ESPN and the men's was on major network, yes, CBS. Interesting. Charlie, you got to read on that?
Caitlin Clark. I mean, man, you get a women's basketball player that can shoot it from 35 feet like she can, and who can pass like she can. It was must-see TV. And I found the women's Final Four. I watched all the games, men's and women's, and I enjoyed watching the women's game more. And historically, I really haven't. Historically, when I've watched women's basketball, it hasn't really drawn my interest at all. I felt like there are certain sports that for women come across better on TV than others, and basketball has never been one of them until this year. So, and by the way, you talk about the ratings; they were double what the Masters did on Sunday. So I think the women had like 18 million, and the Masters was like 9. So it's unbelievable what she did.
What do you think is next then for women's basketball? Is this going to elevate the WNBA, or is just sort of a one-off, sort of the Caitlin Clark craze? It'll be hard for her to replicate that in the WNBA. She'd still be a great player, but it'd be hard to replicate that. And because she was the star of the NCAA tournament and women's basketball at the collegiate level, will those sorts of the viewership hold, or is that going to slide a lot? Anybody want to take a shot at
Let me jump in. It's definitely not guaranteed to translate to the WNBA because it is a higher level play. I was reading the other day that historically guards breaking in the WNBA have had a more difficult time than the big players finding their game and becoming successful. It's often taken 2 or 3 years. And some folks who went on to become pretty prominent players, were averaging about 10 points a game there as first-year players. So that could be a little bit of a challenge for the WNBA. It'll depend a lot on how Caitlin Clark's team, the Indiana Fever, click together. Early indicators are that the Fever's drawing a lot of interest. Almost all their games are going to be televised. I'm sure this will translate to ticket sales, but a lot is probably resting on Clark's performance. The NCAA tournament did elevate the names of a few other players, so I think American households will have a little bit more recognition of who's on the floor, which is also a big thing. One of the challenges, though, the WNBA has is most Americans, unless you've got a WNBA team in your city, most Americans couldn't list more than 4 or 5 WNBA teams. So that will be a little challenging. And it'll be a little challenging for the NCAA next year. It's not probable that they will be able to replicate the kind of excitement they created this year. And I was wondering to myself, what was it about Clark's game that attracted so much attention. And I think it is that some of the skills she displays, like those ridiculous, 35-foot shots, are pretty darned uncommon, but almost everybody can relate to that and how hard that is. Whereas for, a person in the pivot who is maybe the biggest person on the floor, dropping in 30 or 40 points may not seem like quite as big a challenge. So it's interesting. The setting was just right. Iowa was a good team, but they were overachievers, and no one really knew whether they would even reach the Final Four either last year or this year, though they did. So there was some drama surrounding the whole thing.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe some of the skills that Caitlin Clark displayed. I mean, obviously her shooting from distance is amazing. She's a really fast release too, but she reminded me of almost like Pistol Pete Maravich. Not only could she shoot from range, but she can pass.
Yeah,
and not so much of the no look variety, but she can thread the needle on a fast break pass. I would argue as well as anyone I've seen play the game. Now you could argue maybe the women's game is a little slower than the men's is, especially at the top levels. But boy, that was impressive. She was just really fun to watch. She just had the full game, which was really, I think, exciting TV. And hopefully she can keep it going. I think it's going to be a little hard at the WNBA level because I think to some degree, not that Caitlin Clark was exposed, but if you put a big physical athlete on her from a defensive standpoint, you can shut her down to an extent. Not totally, but you can give her real problems.
I have a question. So, I think that's an interesting point, John. Dad, I'm going to move it back to you for a second, though. I'm curious. You mentioned that people couldn't really name many WNBA teams. Can you name 3 or 4 WNBA teams?
I know Connecticut's got a team. Indiana's got a team. There's a team in LA.
States, though.
Yeah, I mean, I don't
know the names. Yeah,
I don't keep
that's
track of them. I don't buy the jerseys. So. And I've never paid attention to who's winning the WNBA championship.
Yeah.
Diana Taurasi comes along. Okay, I remembered her from her days at Connecticut, which is, a school I can remember because I was near there for a long time. And of course, Connecticut's profile in college basketball, the women's side, and now the men's side is pretty extraordinary. It's almost basketball central. In the NCAA now. It's quite a remarkable thing.
Can anyone name 3 WNBA teams? I'm just curious if anyone actually knows 3.
I can give it a shot.
I could do like 2.
Indiana Fever, Minnesota Lynx.
Okay, those are my 2. That's all I can remember.
I feel like there's a team called the Sparks.
Yeah, which is it? Los Angeles Sparks or Las Vegas Sparks? Which one is it? I don't know either. I mean,
it's Los Angeles.
That's why I really think it's almost like ground zero for the WNBA to get a fresh start here. I just don't know if it's going to translate.
Phoenix Mercury sounds like a team for some reason.
There's a team called the Mystics. I think that's Connecticut.
Yeah, maybe.
Can I offer up a prediction for us to make?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. I think the viewership for this year's NCAA women's final is 18 million.
Right.
What's it going to be next year?
Oh, next year for the women's tournament.
Women's NCAA basketball championship final game.
So it's 18 million you said this year?
I think it was 18 million this year. Yeah.
What was it the year before? Do you know?
I don't remember.
I want to say it was around 10. I think I heard somewhere.
Okay. I'm going to say it's going to be around 10 again this next year.
I'll go with 9.
I'm going to go whatever it was 2 years ago plus 2 million because I think it's going to drop off a lot. It's Caitlin Clark has just had incredible star power. I think there'll be more interest because the networks are going to be pushing it harder, are going to be pushing it hard because they saw what they were able to pull off this past year. But I can't imagine it's going to be anywhere near what it was just a couple of weeks ago. I just can't imagine it would be close.
I think it's going to be. I tend to go with Charlie. I think it's going to be about 9, somewhere around half of what it was this time around. I really think that this season had last year as a springboard because the Iowa South Carolina semifinal last year, which I happened to catch because I was in a hotel room and there were limited options on TV. I thought, okay, this might be interesting. Let's get a look at Caitlin Clark live, and I knew that South Carolina was unbeaten. You know, the terror of the NCAA, and that was a terrific game, a really exciting game. And I think a lot of that carried over. And then, of course, Iowa lost in the final to LSU, and you had the little controversy with, say, Angel Reese. So suddenly you had a couple of players and a little bit of drama and so forth. That's going to be hard to recreate. There's going to be an absence felt. And some of the guys in college basketball may divert to the WNBA.
So do you think there's going to be a drop-off then?
Yeah, I said to about 9, back to about half.
Okay.
I think what happened this year was the perfect storm, I think, for the women's college basketball.
Bobby, do you think there's going to be a drop-off?
Yeah, I'll be a little more optimistic. I'll say about 13 million. So I'll drop about 5.
Okay.
Yeah, there aren't going to be really any stars in women's college basketball next year, at least as of now, other than maybe Paige Beckers at UConn. So if she's in the final and they, do a good job of promoting storylines and stuff like that, they could get a pretty good push. But yeah, they're going to have to develop some more stars. So we'll see how that unfolds.
So related question, if this is even going to be measured, how about cumulative WNBA viewership this year, this upcoming season compared to last year? Percentage change.
Can you describe how you're defining cumulative?
Total eyeballs throughout the entire season.
Okay. So it could be like 15 minutes for the whole year, right? I mean, it's
however they measure an eyeball. I mean, I don't know how they measured the 18 million eyeball final.
Yeah, I'm not sure they do it either. It's just like, I noticed that during some of these women's games in the tournament, they were measuring total eyeballs and then basically a sort of a level number. That there are 2 different numbers when you look at it.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I would think, maybe to your point of your question, I would think the total number of eyeballs that will watch it would be extremely high. You could go up 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
What it was. Yeah. This past year, but in terms of regular viewership eyeballs on the game, I don't know, because unless I think it's going to be tough for the Indiana Fever to win a lot of games. Caitlin Clark's really good, and I don't know much about their team at all, but it's hard to go from last to really competitive in any kind of team sport like that. So anyway, I'm thinking like total eyeballs is going to go up 5, maybe even 6 times from a curiosity standpoint, but I don't know how many consistent eyeballs are going to be on that game.
I think it will increase as well. I think that whether it increases or decreases is really the question because no one really knows the numbers. But I think that it's definitely going to increase on average just because even if it's just a few games, like Caitlin Clark is automatically going to take that average number and it'll be up just a little bit regardless. So I have no doubt it's going to increase. Now, I think an even better question would be like, is it going to increase in year 2? Or is it going to, drop off again to what it was before? Depends a lot on how, I guess, Caitlin Clark does her first year. But I will say if she turns out to be a bust in the WNBA, it's going to be like an earthquake for the league because it's like they already struggle financially. They're basically, just kept up by the NBA. So if this star doesn't turn out, it could be another decade before, they punch out another person that's going to have that same type of hype.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, if we're talking WNBA for this upcoming season, I think it's going to increase dramatically. It could be 10 times or higher. The first time Angel Reese faces Caitlin Clark is going to be a huge draw. First time Caitlin Clark faces Diana Taurasi is going to be a huge draw because there was a little bit of trash talk going between some of the her and Sue Bird, talking about Caitlin Clark, how she's got she's going to have a rude awakening when she gets to the WNBA, basically about how challenging it is. Um, and just some of those matchups alone, I think they're going to be WNBA games that outdraw NBA games from this season. Because, in my opinion, NBA regular season is pretty boring a lot of the time. You got a lot of blowouts. Seems like every night half the teams don't even care. They're sitting half their stars, and I think a day or two ago I was looking at the scores from the NBA games for the night, and there were like 4 or 5 games that were 20, 30 point blowouts. So I think the WNBA will have some games that outdraw NBA games, no question.
I think you're probably right, especially this first season or two with Caitlin Clark in the WNBA. I think the ratings will go up almost regardless of how well she plays initially. But I mean, right now I've got to say I'd be more curious to watch a WNBA game with Caitlin Clark than almost any NBA game. Because to your point, I have no interest in watching an NBA game until the playoffs start. Because then the intensity ramps up, right? But unless somebody gives me tickets, good seats for an NBA game, I have no interest in paying attention at all right now. It's just not very exciting.
Well, I would just echo a few of the things that I've heard. I agree with what John just said about interest in a particular game, and yeah, they'd have to be good seats to get me out of my TV room. I think WNBA viewing will go up quite a bit. It may level off early if Caitlin Clark struggles, and she well may. I mean, I think what will be telling is if Caitlin Clark has a respectable season and averages about 15 points and 7 or 8 assists and a handful of rebounds a game, that's a pretty decent rookie year, a very solid rookie year by WNBA standards. But it won't electrify people, and so will the interest level be sustained through the course of the season? And of course, if her team is not a factor in the playoffs, that could hurt a little bit. But I think it's a great opportunity for the WNBA to expose their game and attract more interest. Meanwhile, of course, women's NCAA basketball is going to be searching for a sequel. And they've got some energy, but they don't have the plot line. They don't have the main characters. And it will be fascinating to see how that works. I suspect for women's college basketball, there will be some leveling off next year, unless or until someone else emerges who captures the imagination. I mean, Caitlin Clark seemed like an unstoppable force some nights, and again, this was playing for an Iowa team that was not real strong on the front line, and so there was nobody to take the defensive focus off of Caitlin Clark. It's the way Iowa performed is amazing, and it's a credit to the coach.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think you might see more Caitlin Clark type players showing up in 3 or 4 years. Because I think now coaches and players are going to appreciate all that she brings to the game. Obviously, shooting, that's a lot of work, but it's also you got to be somewhat gifted to do that. But just her ability to distribute the ball and run an offense and lead. I think you're going to find more young women are really going to take note of that. Hopefully, young men too, in terms of really expanding their games. Right now, it seems like even with the men's game, you don't see as much really good imaginative play and skilled play as maybe you could, because there's some fantastic athletes who pick up the game. Well, we'll see what happens. Right now, there's not an obvious plot line that's going to take the place of Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and some of the others. So it'll be interesting to see. My guess is that viewership is going to elevate over last year and over probably the next 5 to 10 years. It'll be greater than what it is. I just don't know if they'll be able to hold it anywhere near the current level, at least at the NCAA level. All right, Bob, you told us that there's some new things brewing in Hanover when it comes to Dartmouth athletes and where things are going. Can you give us an update?
Yeah, well, just to refresh the memory of those who weren't tracking, a few months back, the Dartmouth men's basketball team announced that they wanted to form a union, and they got a favorable ruling from the National Labor Relations Board that said they could go ahead and vote to form a union. They did, and there were a few sympathetic folks on campus, including one of the local labor organizations. And lo and behold, one of the least likely of all places, to press for unionization of the basketball team was suddenly at the forefront of what potentially could be an earthquake in NCAA sports. To put this in perspective, John, the last time Dartmouth was in the NCAA tournament was the year you were born. I got to watch that team play. And it was pretty amazing. They were knocked out by Jerry West and West Virginia. That's ancient history. Since then, there have been highlights have been few and far between. And they had, 1 year when I was a student, my sophomore year, they had a pretty good team. It was one of the years when they were a little over 500. They beat Oregon. They beat Boston College. They played a pretty tough schedule and were competitive. And then they, disappeared again for another 30, 40 years. So it's a pretty amazing situation. Meanwhile, Dartmouth, as an institution, has taken a very firm stand against this. The president of Dartmouth had an editorial, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal this past week, in which he said there's absolutely no way Dartmouth is going to go along with this. And President Bialik said, Dartmouth will take this to the Supreme Court of the United States to preserve the Ivy League way of sports, which she feels would be wrecked. Again, the earthquake would go far beyond the Ivies, depending on how this would play out. I would also note that no other teams at Dartmouth have followed suit. It's not like any others, like this has been a mass movement among the sports. So it's a very, very curious situation. But once again, the legal ramifications could be huge if Dartmouth College lawyers don't win their next case before the National Labor Relations Board or before the Supreme Court, where again, she has sworn they'll take it. So who knows? It could have legal history in the making, slow motion.
I can't help but think back to the very early 70s when you helped march the Dartmouth basketball team in the Milwaukee Classic.
I'll never forget that debacle.
Was it Larry Lawrence or whatever? I remember you were pretty bullish on.
Well, that was a team with James Brown. At guard.
Right.
Dartmouth had fairly good prospects, but they had a couple of fatal flaws. One was no point guard. Their point guard was still a freshman and was ineligible.
Billy Rayner.
He was very good the next year. Billy Rayner.
Yeah.
In fact, when Billy Rayner and James Brown, who'd been an All-City New York star, were in the same backcourt, Dean Smith said Dartmouth's got the best backcourt in the country. Unfortunately, they didn't have the rest of the parts, but
right.
They still put together a pretty good team and notched some good wins my sophomore year. But that game in Marquette, the other problem was Dartmouth's center was in his first game coming off a bout of mononucleosis and was facing Jim Jones, So, you had a formula for catastrophe, and Dartmouth pretty well realized that. That was, pretty unforgettable, humbling night. I was somewhat optimistic, but that was a disaster. Yeah.
Well, anyway, it's interesting. We've gone from that to Dartmouth possibly reshaping college sports. So
yeah.
Be interesting to see where this all goes. Do you know what the timing is for some of these hearings?
Not precisely. I think the next round with the National Labor Relations Board is going to happen within 6 months or so. A Supreme Court case, heaven only knows, because those of course can take years to unfold. The one interesting question is, what becomes of Dartmouth men's basketball in the interim if this is all unresolved? If Dartmouth refuses to deal with the players, will they play? Will Dartmouth field a team? What's going on? Of course, Dartmouth doesn't field a team. Most of the world won't notice, but it would disrupt Ivy League scheduling, to say the least.
Right. I'll throw it out to you just because it's interesting. I won't mention names because I don't think it was told to me in such a way that I feel comfortable doing that. But I know that when Wisconsin made it to the Final Four the last time, there were some players on the team who wanted to basically boycott.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Along the lines of unionization.
Wow.
But the team agreed that there'd be a team vote, and if any one of the players did not want to boycott, they wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how many. My guess is only a couple of the guys actually wanted to do that in terms of boycotting. But it's interesting that that discussion's been out there for a while. I know the Northwestern football team went through this, about 3 or 4 years ago as well. So these cases are interesting, and I agree they would change the landscape of college sports.
And that would be particularly true the way during the universe that athletes are in the Ivy League, where they're not scholarship players. In fact, how you describe them as employees is perplexing, because they can remain enrolled in school and lose no financial aid or anything else if they choose not to play ball. They're not required to do anything, and yet somehow this is a unionization case. It's interesting,
pretty crazy. Okay, hey, Bobby, you want to march us through what's going on in hockey right now?
Yeah, so another exciting NCAA hockey tournament. And Denver is your national champion, beating Boston College, who was ranked number 1 most of the season in the title game. That's Denver's 10th national championship, which is the most among any school. They're the first to get to 10. So they just have a real good system of building hockey teams. They got a good mix of great young talent and veteran players, and they seem to be in the mix pretty much every year. So impressive win for them. And the NHL is winding down to the final days here. We got a few teams battling for final playoff spots, and the playoffs are about a week away. So NHL hockey is going to be at its height here soon, because there's nothing better in sports than the NHL playoffs.
Okay. I guess we know how you feel about that. Hey, question for you. I think we're all noticing that the transfer portal is becoming quite a disruptor, certainly for the sports like college basketball and football. Just following Wisconsin's fortunes a little bit, they too have lost a number of players to the transfer portal. Some of these guys didn't play as much, but a couple of them are really pretty good. What's your reading from a disruption factor, if you will, looking at college hockey and the transfer portal and NIL money?
Yep. Yeah, it's definitely, the portal itself is very prevalent in college hockey now. NIL, not as much, although we're probably only 2-3 years away from that being an even bigger deal. But yeah, I mean, you got lots of guys entering the portal. Minnesota just got UConn's leading scorer through the portal. And yeah, I know Wisconsin had a couple guys transfer out. Minnesota just had a defenseman transfer to Providence. So yeah, I don't think it's on the same level as basketball and football with the percentage of players from rosters sometimes turning over, but it's a very, very real thing in college hockey as well, and that's going to continue happening. So there'll be a lot of teams that have to really figure out how they want to approach that, and whether they want to continue trying to go after, young high school talent, or maybe more go for players that have played a couple years of junior and are going to be more program guys that are more likely to stick around.
Okay. All right. So if we want to move forward, a little different segment of our program here in terms of just interesting tidbits of things that are going on in the world of sports. Benny, you want to kick us off on that?
Sure, John. So, in terms of what's going on in the world of sports that's interesting, I know for people that, obviously regular viewers know this, but for new viewers, John's favorite sport's soccer. He's a huge soccer guy, watches all the time. We were just talking the other day about how LAFC in the MLS recently signed a star soccer player from France who is currently playing for AC Milan in the Italian Soccer League. And so Olivier Giroud will be joining LAFC as a striker. This is the second French superstar that is joining LAFC now. Kind of like so basically this is like the West Coast version of Inter Miami at this point. And so creating a little bit of rivalry in terms of star power, though nothing obviously equates to what Inter Miami has with Messi and all those other guys. But just kind of interesting to see some more stars coming over following kind of the lead set by Messi. And I think this summer we're going to have a lot more probably people also coming over. There's been a little bit more loosening up of sort of salary cap rules and restrictions to allow teams to maybe acquire a few more guys. And there seems to be a lot of buzz kind of generating around now about, future guys that are going to come to MLS and play this summer. So it should be interesting to see how it goes.
All right. Charlie, how about you? What you got?
Just one quick thing, tying together a couple of our topics from earlier. Golf TV ratings are off about 20% this year. Some of the pundits are attributing that to the loss of some of the players from the PGA Tour to LIV. The hope was that maybe those ratings would rebound at the Masters, because now you've got the full field. You've got DeChambeau and Koepka and Cameron Smith and the other guys back in the fold, competing against the best PGA Tour guys. And lo and behold, the Masters ratings were also down 20% from a year ago. So those are pretty monumental shifts in a well-established sport. And that certainly is going to have the PGA Tour brass up late at night trying to figure out how to stem the tide.
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's also hard for me to reconcile when guys like Phil Mickelson and Greg Norman and Jon Rahm say they are growing the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Tell me about it, guys. I don't see it.
Yep.
I mean, in terms of participation being up amongst golfers paying greens fees to play, certainly that is up, but that's got nothing to do with LIV Golf. So it's be interesting to watch how this unfolds. I'm a little uneasy where this whole thing is going, but only time will tell. Because a lot of people are starting to lose money, or they're certainly making less money, and that viewership number is big. You need a big TV draw to make professional golf work. Okay, Bobby, what you got?
Yeah, so just to wrap up a little bit more about the NHL season that's just about finished here. New York Rangers, your President's Trophy winner for best record in the NHL. A lot of talent on that roster, so look out for them in the playoffs. best team in the Western Conference with the Dallas Stars. Another real impressive season by them. And some unfortunate seasons by some picks amongst us here. Chicago Blackhawks finished last in their division with rookie Connor Bedard, and the Anaheim Ducks finished second to last in the Pacific. So not real impressive, but wasn't surprising to me at all. I don't know what you guys.
Oh, rigged. It's rigged.
And as far as individual basis, Nikita Kucherov's looked like he's probably going to wrap up the Art Ross Trophy for most points. 142 points from Nikita Kucherov this year for the Lightning. Real impressive. Connor McDavid got up to 100 assists. Just notched his 100th assist last night. He is the first to do that since Mario Lemieux, and he's the only other players to do it are Bobby Orr and Wayne Gretzky. So pretty impressive list to be a part of there. Austin Matthews of the Maple Leafs, the American superstar, is 1 goal away from 70, which is another pretty rare feat. So we'll see if he can get that in the next day or two here. And the Calder Trophy race for Rookie of the Year is going to come down likely to Connor Bedard, which everybody would expect to be in that race. He missed a portion of the season with a broken jaw, which made it a little bit tougher. But the other guy is former Gopher Brock Faber of the Minnesota Wild, who's had an unbelievable season. He's been one of the best defensemen in the league this year, among the leaders in ice time, and he's second among rookies in points. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if Brock Faber steals it. He's got a great career ahead of him. But get ready for the playoffs. It'll be fun.
All right. And finally, Bob, what have you got for us?
Well, just a historical note. This will be something for Benny's benefit. There's one final reference to Dartmouth basketball, just to show the overall historical trajectory of men's basketball at Dartmouth. Dartmouth had 2 Final Four teams and a finals appearance in the 1940s. In the 1950s, which was the last time they had NCAA tournament teams, the coach was a guy named Doggy Julian, whose previous job had been as head coach of the Boston Celtics. And before that, he had won a national championship at Holy Cross. So he went from Holy Cross to the Celtics to Dartmouth, and it didn't seem like a downward move. So the world has changed.
Yeah.
Wow.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's
pretty amazing.
Shows, I mean, the fact that you even know that just shows that, you know, you've lived through a few different cycles of the planet.
Good historians dig deep there,
yeah.
Ben.
Or if they've had lived experiences, I guess. Well, I mean, you're an antique. What can I say? A living antique here. Living fossil. So there you go. Yeah. Back when Dartmouth was good and known, which just seems like ancient history at this point. I'm surprised you still watch their games. I really don't understand it.
Still waiting for a miracle.
Yeah. Well, better wait a few more centuries for that one, probably.
Well, who knows?
What you need, Bob, is some wealthy alum cough up a lot of NIL money and buy yourself a team.
Well, you never know these days, and there are guys out there with a lot of money. In fact, I was quite taken aback to read in a very recent Dartmouth newsletter from my class that one of the class's little projects is financing an athletic sponsorship. So who the heck knows what might come out at the far end.
That's right. Okay. Well, we're at the top of the hour. Had a good session today. We'll be hopefully back in about 2 weeks, and we can take a more in-depth look at discuss predictions for both the NHL and the NBA. So thanks for tuning in, everybody, and we'll be back to you real soon.
All right.
Good night.
Yeah, good night.